This show has changed television horror as we know it. From ambitious costumes with animatronic details to scripts drawn from real-life nightmare events, American Horror Story consistently pulls out all the stops. But how does the series still manage to be so damn scary after a decade of spine-chilling glory? It's all thanks to Ryan Murphy's creative genius and a bunch of insane rules that the cast and crew must follow. The devil's in the details. American Horror Story has an unexpected origin. It was inspired by Glee. Or rather, as the remedy to Glee. In an interview with Elle, Ryan Murphy admitted, "Horror Story came about because I was like, I can't write any more nice speeches for these Glee kids about love and tolerance and togetherness. I'll kill myself. I'm gonna write a show about sex and mass murders." Next, Ryan and his creative partner Brad Falchuk needed to bring that dark vision to life. Do you know what gives this show its signature look and feel? It's not just the outfits, which we'll get to in a second, it's because of how it's filmed.
Part of the signature look is attributable to the fact that we do shoot on film. We can create a lot of different looks and a lot of different styles at the time we shoot it by choosing which film stock we use, by choosing how we process that film stock.
But the attention to detail goes beyond the filming process. The sets, props, and locations featured in the show all work together to create television perfection. Whether it's digging real graves like in Coven or constructing an elaborate asylum that requires a team of 60 carpenters, no aspect of this show is left to chance. And that includes the details we don't always notice. Did you know that some of the series' opening credits contain clues for what we can expect next? For example, the top hat in the Freak Show intro was a sneaky clue about Lady Gaga's role in the next season, Hotel. But it gets even more meta. Eagle-eyed Horror Story fanatics noticed that Sarah Paulson's character from Season 1, the psychic Billie Dean Howard, actually predicted everything we saw in all the next seasons, including Roanoke and Apocalypse. Now that is some next-level sorcery. Psychic connections aside, there is something else every season of American Horror Story has shared, and it's not spine chills. We're talking about stomach-turning makeup and eye-catching costumes. You need to look the part. It's not easy making each horrific creature look as realistic as possible, but the team behind American Horror Story does just that. So what kind of magic goes into creating some of the creepiest costumes in Hollywood? It starts with good planning and a lot of lube. Okay, that was just one time. Way back in Season 1, Evan Peters had a few wardrobe malfunctions. While he was trying to get into the skin-tight rubber suit he needed to wear, he ripped it 5 times. But once they'd covered him from head to toe in Vaseline, he could slide into the outfit without issue, which just presented the next challenge.
Everywhere?
You can't see in the masks or really move or hear anything, and they can't really hear you, so it's not a very practical.
And that's nothing compared to the grueling transformation process some of his co-stars have had to go through. Remember Pepper from the Asylum in the 2nd season? Naomi Grossman's transformation into the Pinhead took 3 hours in the makeup chair for every scene she featured in. She didn't mind though.
The process of doing the makeup is a blast. I know that's not a conventional answer. Sitting still for hours and hours and hours.
But the record for the most time spent on one character goes to Sarah Paulson, who played conjoined twins Betty and Dot in Freak Show. Each scene featuring the twins took a whopping 12 hours to film, with a heavy reliance on animatronics and editing. To get into character, Sarah recorded the dialogue of one twin at a time, using recordings of her own voice as prompts and giving a whole new meaning to talking to yourself.
What's your problem? Why don't you say anything? Why do you have nothing to say? Oh yeah? Yeah.
And it's not just the main cast members who are subjected to crazy outfits and endless hours in the makeup chair. As director Michael Goy explained, every single character featured on the show must look perfect or the atmosphere is ruined.
What we have here is the Minotaur that she's seen in episode 1, 2, and 3 of American Horror Story, played by Amir Baraka. At first we put a huge cowling on his neck to make his neck look bigger, and then this is more of a mask that we kind of slip over his head.
There's more. Once the actors look the part, they have to act the part. And sometimes that's harder than you'd think. Just ask Kathy Bates. The series regular faced a different kind of challenge in Freak Show, and not because she had to sport a beard to play Ethel. Instead, while Jessica Lange showed off her German accent, Kathy struggled to speak with a Baltimore twang.
We're all hopeless, Doc. We're all gonna die.
But once she finally nailed the accent, she refused to speak normally until the season stopped filming, even when the cameras weren't rolling. she's not the only actress on set willing to stay in character. In Asylum, Chloe Sevigny's character had such complicated prosthetics in order for the show to green screen her legs into stumps that between takes, she kept these on and whirled around the set on a wheelchair. And while the costumes and makeup present a challenge to the actors, the real issues are the ones we can't see. Don't be afraid.
But yeah, it's not, the only thing that's really scary is the amount of hours that we work on that show.
Well, that's not totally true. Considering the content and gory graphic nature of this series, it's no surprise that the cast has had their fair share of emotional scarring. Evan Peters, who's been in the cast since the first season, is vocal about how difficult it is to constantly play a psycho and the psychological effect that this has had on him. The actor revealed that shooting the sinister material that makes fans love American Horror Stories so much is totally exhausting. And to combat that, he brings out his lighter side between takes. I'm goofy, I'm silly, I like to have fun. Horror Story sort of demanded that of me. It's really mentally draining, and you don't want to go to those places ever in your life. But you have to go there for the scenes. Sarah Paulson hasn't had an easy time either. In 2012, the actress admitted that Asylum was the hardest season to film because her character's struggles really hit home. There were moments where I did go into a corner on the set and just bawl my eyes out because it was just a very traumatic thing to play. She's not the only one to think so. Remember the musical number from that season, The Name Game?
The Name Game. Judy, 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 bo booty, banana, fana, fo foodie, fee, fi, mo mood.
This was all thanks to Jessica Lange, who embraced the power of improv and begged the writers for a break from the horror with something lighter. But since then, things have gotten so much worse for Sarah Paulson, because Ryan Murphy got personal and introduced all her real-life phobias into the plot of the show. In Cult, Sarah literally had to face her fears when she came up against bees, clowns, and heights. She's not the only one to have been affected by the show. During her first appearance in the franchise in Coven, Gaborni Sidibe had a full-on panic attack. As the actress admitted to Parade, the third season's torture chamber set was so realistic that it really spooked her. I lost my breath and started having a panic attack, and after only a few seconds, I had to leave. Surprisingly, that is exactly the response that the writers want all of us to have. Because the horrific truth is that not everything in this show is fiction. Always draw inspiration from the real world. With the numbers of freaks, creeps, and mass murderers we've been introduced to courtesy of Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk, you'd be forgiven for thinking these two guys were seriously dark and twisted. But actually, they're drawing inspiration from real events, which just makes the show that much scarier. Every season is inspired by at least one real event. Murder House was inspired by the Amityville Manor, which you may recognize from the Ryan Reynolds movie. In the 1970s, the house was the scene of a literal nightmare. A young man shot his parents and 4 siblings while they slept. And there was a second inspiration, the Franklin House, used by an abusive doctor in the 1940s for drug-induced orgies. Of course, the series also features the Black Dahlia, a well-known and gruesome murder story that really took place in the 40s, and it's the same for Asylum, which is based on Danvers State Lunatic Asylum and Willowbrook State School, where horrible events were discovered by a journalist called Geraldo Riviera. In Coven, Kathy Bates' character represented the real Delphine LaLaurie, who was just as awful and twisted as the show portrayed her. But she's not the only one. Danny Houston's Axeman was also based on a real serial killer from New Orleans that was never caught. The real story behind Freak Show is a little more surprising. Remember Mordrake, the guy with the talking face on the back of his head? Based on fact? Okay, not entirely. He was based on a well-known urban legend, but that's still creepy. Next up, Hotel. Lady Gaga's character, Swanky Diggs, were inspired by a Chicago hotel that was rumored to be haunted. According to Ryan Murphy, he got the idea from a surveillance video that went around that showed a girl getting into an elevator in a downtown hotel that was rumored to be haunted, and she was never seen again. So what about Roanoke? Yep, also true. In 1590, Governor John White discovered that the entire Roanoke colony had disappeared into thin air, leaving behind nothing but the word Croatoan carved on a wooden post. And while Trump certainly helped the Cheetos gag in Cult, the real inspiration for the 7th season was a variety of cult figures like Charles Manson, David Koresh, and Jim Jones Murphy. By now you've probably guessed that 1984 also draws on truth, this time in the form of serial killer Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker. Crazily, Ramirez was actually a frequent visitor of the hotel that inspired the 4th season, brings the series full circle. Finally, Apocalypse is a nod to what could have happened if the Cold War ended differently, or if any kind of nuclear war actually broke out, or, if there was some sort of virus that wiped out the Earth. Which just leaves one question. What the hell inspired the upcoming season? For more insane behind-the-scenes facts from your favorite shows, check out our other videos. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, stay awesome.